Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hello. Has anybody seen any cool birds lately?
Well, that's a strong opener. Yeah, actually, yes. What were the? Once again, I mean, we talked just a second about Montana, but were they magpies that I kept
Oh, the
seeing?
ravens?
Not
Big
ravens.
ol'
I think
raven? Oh, I saw.
they were magpies maybe in
Mm,
Montana. So I thought they
mhm.
were super cool. Which I mean, I think that's what the big black and white things. But yeah, maybe
Oh, yeah.
Ray
cool
and
birds.
Alexis were recently in Montana for the National Association of County Ag Agents meeting. Alexis went in ag agent clothing, or ag agent, big bad wolf style.
Making connections with other folks of her like mind in other
Yeah,
states.
yeah.
So
It
yeah,
was
good
it
stuff.
was really cool, but
But it's funny.
yes,
But I was looking for cool birds out there. So
Mhm, mhm. I don't think I had ever actually seen a raven, like a true
they're
giant
big.
raven
They're really big.
before, and they were huge, and I was like, "Do you think we could be friends? Does anybody have any peanuts? Like, I'm in."
I hear they're very smart. They're very
Mhm.
smart, and they live
Yeah,
for a while.
parrots,
So
like, very
Yeah,
that's what
there's
they say the lore is, you know how if you're out in the middle of the woods and you hear somebody talking or like weird sounds out in the woods, they're like, "No, you didn't," type thing. A
mhm.
lot of the times people the scientists will tell you that they're ravens who have heard that somewhere and they're
oh
making
wow,
those sounds because they know humans make these sounds. And so I'm like, yeah, it's totally ravens and not other creepy.
that's not
Yeah.
creepy. It's not
But
Hanks
also,
or
no, you
Ghost or
didn't.
yeah. I'm
I,
walking
a
fast.
couple of years ago, I read a book called "Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are?" I think that's what it's called.
Mm.
And it's, one among other things, it's a very good book. I would recommend. Highly readable, but also good. It has a lot of good information in it. But one of the things that I kind of took away from it is that primatologists who study primates and corvid specific ornithologists who study birds and specifically corvids, which are crows and ravens, there's kind of a healthy competition between them on behalf of the species that they study, that which of these represents a highest level or whatever of animal intelligence. And it was pretty wild just how, you said that here they're really smart, but there's really extensive like object permanence components
Mhm.
where they can understand where something was, remember where it was, go back to it. They can have unique facial recognition of humans and other
Mhm.
species, and even assign them names in their, the sounds, that there's a specific sound they
Oh
would
wow.
just make. I assume if they saw you, they would say Ray.
That's
But I
in my
don't.
mind. That's what I was. I'm glad you said that. Or
Yeah.
so yeah,
Dude, that's
yeah.
exactly what I've heard.
Yeah. Whoa.
Crazy.
Not creepy, but that's pretty incredible. That's like higher order level intelligence. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
Mhm.
yeah.
it's a cool book. I think the author's last name is Wall, maybe
Mhm.
Wahl, but it's a cool little book. I haven't seen any cool birds myself lately. I've seen a bunch of cardinals and some blue
Mhm.
jays. Some hummingbirds. That's
Oh,
always pretty cool.
those are always
They're so
fun.
cute.
We're probably about a month and a half out from goldfinch season in
Mhm.
my neck of the woods, where a lot of the gray coneflower starts setting seed and a couple other things, and they just come in and go ham on it and gain. We talked about giant pumpkins gaining 30 to 40 pounds overnight. Well, they proportionally do that in our backyard, which is pretty cool.
I do that over the winter too, so I
Yeah.
Yeah,
feel
I gain. I no
The
longer
winter,
lose.
the winter swelling.
I don't want. I don't want to lose my gains. So that's my current life philosophy. I'm going to maintain my
my
gains.
cheesecake gains.
My cheese gains, my cheese and bread gains. So, yeah, cool birds. Yeah, yeah. Start to notice. I mean, there's all these nice apps and stuff, that I
Mhm.
see
Merlin.
now that you can just like,
Mhm.
let it record and then it's going to tell you. Usually with
I have learned so
pretty good
much
degree of
about,
accuracy.
like, our birds
Yeah.
from that app, like what's
Mhm.
Yeah,
there,
pretty
what things
incredible.
sound like. Yeah, it's,
The thing that I liked about
pretty
it
cool.
was that it's out of a lab at Cornell, which is,
Uh-huh.
some people don't realize, Cornell is actually the land grant university in New York
Mm-hmm.
City, or New York City,
Yep.
in New York State,
Mhm.
much like University of Kentucky is here. And so
What?
this like idea of a relevant, like not only relevant, but wildly popular technology
Yeah.
that particularly blew up, I think, over COVID, but has, since retained a level of popularity. I just thought that was a really cool story. It came out of a lab up there in
Yeah.
Cornell.
The corvids over COVID. Yeah. I like it.
That's
Corvids
right.
for COVID, COVID
Putting
for
the COVID in
corvids.
Corvid, I don't.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
gets, this stew gets thick. So yeah.
Yeah, the primatologists and the ornithologists agree that my human intelligence is lower than both corvids and other primates. That's the
My
one.
capacity may be greater, but in actuality and
Yeah.
implementation is much less.
Yeah, I was like, but it was funny though, and they're like, that not true either. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not true.
Sorry.
None of
On
us
all
laugh.
accounts, negative, negative to the contrary.
This study was funded by my wife.
Privately
Just kidding.
funded.
Oh,
Well,
save us, Alexis.
when I am often seeing a lot of these birds outside in the field, it's because I'm outside weeding in some form or fashion. And so that's what we're talking about today is mechanical weed control specifically, or even, cultural. Sometimes I like lump those two things together, even though there's technically a difference. Between cultural and mechanical, but to me
Mm-hmm.
they blend, right? The whole like square rectangle
It's
thing.
like chemical versus non-chemical and everything else you can break down from there. I mean, some
Yeah,
kind of, if different ways of looking at it, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah,
can for those of us with a subcorvid intelligence, could you explain
yeah.
the
So,
cultural versus mechanical, and then kind of go from there? So we're laying aside
mhm.
spraying the thing and it dies because of a chemical interaction. So no Roundup, no 2,4-D, no non-selective, no
No
selective
herbicide, yeah.
herbicides at all, and maybe
No
even
vinegar,
putting aside
salt.
the vinegars and that kind of thing from like the certified organic, so the so-called certified
None of
organic
that.
herbicides.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
outside of that, then there's still distinctions, cultural and mechanical.
cultural, mechanical, and Ray, chime in here. I tend to think of cultural weed control as things like rotational planting or
Yeah.
cover crops.
Suppression, yeah.
Suppress, like, yeah, cover crops, and then mechanical, is I think the obvious like tractors and tilling or even hand hoeing. But I think solarization is one of those ones, which is
Yeah.
putting
It's
down
its
a
own
black tarp,
category.
where like I think people tend to put it in cultural, but you're like, okay, I'm using a tool to do like that's not a natural tool. So to
Mechanically
me,
cover
it's
the
kind of
ground.
mechanical, right? And so that's where I think like a lot of these things
It's like a
are.
thermodynamic
Yeah, they're
Ooh, its own
interchangeable.
thermodynamic
And
weed
like
category.
control.
if you're using cover crop, for example, you have to use some sort of mechanical thing to kill off the cover crop, right? Usually
Crimp
for
it or cut it or
crimp
yeah.
it, or you're even mowing it. Even if it dies, you have to mow it.
Mhm.
You have to do something. So that's why they kind of blend together for me. And I don't know. I think the word culture is something like I think of, like grandma hoeing in the garden, right? Like she's doing
Yeah.
mechanical control, but it's part of a culture. And so the words just, in my
It
brain kind of blend together.
it's such an awesome topic for me, and I know we've talked about me being a vampire before, but, going way back in the olden days, but it's pretty incredible to me. We did several acres, grew up with lots of things on the farm, but we had lots of things that need to be cultivated, tobacco among them, lots of, vegetable crops. But at that time, 2 things. In the very beginning, my earliest memories are, first of all, no irrigation, which is pretty
Mm,
incredible. No
mhm,
irrigation, but we had some land that, helped us out with that, some nice loamy
mhm,
soil that held moisture. But the second biggest thing was we only had mechanical cultivation when things were in the field. Now, when tobacco
mm,
plants were being grown, we used methyl bromide for weed control there. But as far as in the field, there was only one option, and that was mechanical weed control. That was cultivation with a tractor, or yes, my father made me learn how to cultivate with a 5-point plow and a mule cultivator. So did a lot of that. And I mean, that was surprisingly effective and still done to this day in certain communities, but only mechanical cultivation. And we did things on a pretty good scale and made a pretty good living of things, but with absolutely no chemical inputs.
mhm,
And we had some, with 3 brothers and a sister and some uncles to help out, but it was all hoeing the tobacco, chopping it out. Old school, but pretty incredible in my mind to think back on those days where it was strictly mechanical weed control. There was no other option, no other way that we did things. And to look at where we are today with all the options that we may not be talking about today, all the chemical pre and post and all of that. But
Mhm.
it kind of grounds me in the fact that when someone's approaching, like a new producer, they're approaching growing something. I usually start from the very base. Last week we had Joe Kuzman on, and he talked about the approachability of growing giant pumpkins, and I love his take on that because he said you don't have to do everything at a super high level at first. You can, get a seed and put it in the ground and see where it goes. And I love his
Mhm.
take on that. And that's kind of where we were at in growing crops. We had a certain tolerance for weeds, but when we did have to do weed control, the easiest thing we would do is mechanical weed control. It's very
Mhm.
straightforward. There was no such thing as weed resistance to our mechanical methods for the most part. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
We just didn't worry about any of that. It was very labor intensive, and that brings its own issues. But usually, when I'm working with new producers, I start with the simplest methods first, and we cover that. And there may be better methods, more advanced methods. When they're ready for that, we talk about that. But
Mhm.
mechanical weed control is like near and dear to my heart because sort of the formative years of my life, that's all that we did in farming was mechanical weed control. That's it.
Mhm.
End of
Well,
story.
Ray, without outing your vampiric past, what was the year, like the decade time period that we're talking about when you were doing that?
Earliest memories would have been the 80s.
Yeah.
The 80s going into mid 90s. Probably.
Yeah.
We
Well,
started to get into irrigation in the mid 90s, of course, early 90s. But as far as weed control, we still were very conservative on chemical usage,
Mhm.
both, in the eastern part of the state where I grew up in the foothills. Availability, you had to drive a long ways to get those
mhm.
chemicals. But my father used the tried and true methods of, cultivation and hoeing
Yeah.
things out.
There's not a ton of chemicals you can use in specialty crops anyways.
No.
So, like, I mean, it's
And there
not.
was not a lot of options, especially at that time. They've advanced a little bit, but at that time, that was especially true. So, yeah. Yeah, that was in the 80s. I remember we just, we attacked weeds from a very mechanical standpoint,
Well, this
brute
is
force.
something that I think about pretty regularly is that we are, there's whole podcasts, whole series, whole films, books, everything dedicated to this concept, but we exist in this really odd moment in even within agricultural history, which itself is an odd moment in the history of our planet, where some of these things were even possible chemically. It's just this
Mm,
thing that we sort of take for granted. And I've been thinking a lot about, there was a particular ride that was at Disney World and at Disneyland called the World of Tomorrow, or also known as
Mm,
Tomorrowland.
Tomorrowland, yeah.
mm,
And you would get on this cart and it would take you around and it would show you all. It was a very futuristic, forward looking thing that in Disneyland opened in the 50s. And one of the things of all the things that Disney World or Disneyland could be talking about, one of them was agriculture. And one of the multiple of the exhibits were actually sponsored by, they were called like the Monsanto Look at the Future.
hmm,
Monsanto, one of the major companies that now has merged, but there was just this idea of like thinking about the future of agriculture and the future of growing things as this better use of technology. And I mean, I admire the optimism there, but it created this moment where like no one would have thought about it using it that way because everyone was thinking about mostly mechanical cultivation at that point.
Mhm,
mhm,
This predates a lot of the Roundup Ready corn and beans
sure.
and things where you could even do that. And so you had to think about, and so as much as I do not want to say, oh, the past was always better than the present, because that generally wasn't true unless
Mm,
you were a white guy with some money. There were some things that we're returning to now or thinking about now in the face of
mhm,
herbicide resistance and other stuff like that. That's where mechanical weed cultivation becomes this all old things made new again.
mhm,
And I just think about it like situating it in a little bit of a bigger
mm,
historical context. It always just sort of just blows my mind that we just keep coming back to back in 2023 when fertilizer prices 22, 23, when fertilizer and input prices were super high. There were people starting to plant lespedeza again as a cover crop
mhm.
that fixes nitrogen to help offset their fertilizer costs. Well, that was something that was really commonplace in the
Yeah.
30s. And it's just those funny little nods to
Return.
the vintage, but also let's embrace what's going on now. That I think within this mechanical weed cultivation or weed control, it's a really good example of that because at its
Mhm.
heart, uh, when I think of mechanical weed cultivation, I think of pulling weeds out of the ground, more or less, including their roots and stalks, by dragging a piece of steel through the ground.
Mhm.
That's what a lot of it is. And whether that's pulled by a human or that's pulled by a tractor or pulled by a horse, that's at its heart the simplicity of it. But there's some other, some complexities there that
Lots of
maybe we can
nuances
talk
there,
about.
yeah.
And new technologies that are taking this old concept and doing it a little bit better, doing it a little bit more efficiently. Yeah, I think the first time that my parents or my dad definitely was into some of the chemical stuff. We put down
Mhm.
Mhm.
pre-emergent fertilizer, then come back with herbicide or with Roundup or whatever, depending on what it was. And it wasn't till I did a one semester thing out at the South Farm that I saw things like scuffle hose
Oh,
and
yeah.
Mhm.
the kind of triangle or pyramid
Yeah.
shaped hose and stuff like that, and the hand cultivation and pull behind tractors and all that kind of stuff. Um,
Oh, yeah. That's a fun thing. I learned about the, scuffle hoe or hula hoe is how I
Yeah.
learned, a name or a circle hoe. There's, like, a bunch of names for it, but, I did an internship at the UK Arboretum, in Fayette County. If any of you haven't been there, you should go. It's beautiful. But anyways, I interned there, and so everything we were doing was, pretty much hand weeding in a, botanical garden. Because there were people everywhere. You never knew if a kid was going to run through a bed and there was also, they were ornamental. So there's not a lot of herbicides labeled for ornamental use. And so everything was mechanical and by hand there. And that's where I got introduced to the stirrup hoe, hula
Yeah.
hoe, whatever. And since then, it's been probably my favorite thing ever. I remember he was like, yeah, it's the push and the pull.
Slide
And I
it,
was like,
yeah.
what?
I mean,
and
when you're on a farm and you have like a race, like at the beginning of the day, you have a race to get your
Yeah.
favorite hoe because
Yeah.
there are some good ones in the shed that you
Uh-huh.
definitely want to get there and get those. That would be one
They
of
have the
them.
right
Yeah.
length handle
Just the
and stuff
perfect,
like
they're
that. Yeah.
lightweight or they get extra sharp when you sharpen them or whatever. But yeah, you're at a certain point in your life when, you have your favorite mechanical, like
Those
hand
are, yeah,
device
when
cultivator.
farmers get excited about tools, like mechanics get excited about new tools, farmers get excited about new tools too, and, like a good hoe or,
Yes.
something for the tractor,
Now,
even if they're just, a shank, it's a piece of steel that you're running through the field, it doesn't have
something.
moving parts, it just sits there,
Well, that's
is
a good point too.
exciting.
They don't break down. They're not complicated, so
Mhm.
that has its own value. And you guys tell me if I'm making this up. Like, there's been some really super cool mechanical cultivation, like hand implements in the past. Like, I'm thinking of the Kentucky high wheel cultivator. Now, didn't that literally come
Mm,
out of Kentucky? Do you guys know? Like, one of my favorite hand tools. It's like a little 5 point or 4 point mini cultivator, but it's literally got a high wheel in front with a little cultivator
mm,
on the back. But I mean, implements like that, a lot of those came out of Kentucky.
mm,
And I think that's one of the more famous examples. But I think it's called
mhm.
a Kentucky high wheel
yeah,
Yeah,
and
there's
cultivator.
the
still.
wheel is often metal. There's not really like a tread on it,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
My
That's an
my
Yeah.
example.
assumption
One
is
of
that, and
those.
my assumption is that's coming out of a tradition of small scale intensive hand
Mhm.
cultivation of something like tobacco,
Yes,
where you're
yeah,
I mean, you could do 5 acres with a small family by hand mostly, and or more. Some people did more than that, but it's
And
a little
sometimes
bit
on
you get in
land
and out of the
that's
rows
not.
and all that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, land that's not great for tractor movement, like, maybe
yeah,
you're doing, and
Yeah,
mules eat
yeah.
and cost money and,
Yeah.
so if you're just doing some stuff, small stuff, those are nice. I had a friend who I remember how excited she got a little, grant for tools from Kentucky State University when she was starting her farm, and that was one of the things she bought, and just her excitement on being able to go from hoeing with, just by hand that way, to the exact same hoe but on a wheel where she could move it a little bit more easily. And just how excited she was for
I
something like
was when I
that.
first used those, so I get that excitement. When I first used
Yeah.
one, it was in the garden plots. I think it was green beans. We were trying to, you have to cast like the soil up at a certain angle so it covers in between the plants. There's like an art to it. But I used my first experience with a high wheel was doing that, and it was pretty cool. I was like, okay, this device is way cooler than it should be. So it was sort of like we had to
Yeah.
learn on the mule in our particular farm because Dad just thought everybody should know how to do that. I don't know, but we used that a lot,
He's not wrong.
mule cultivation. And then we graduated later on. He would let us use, and I'm going to throw a trade name. It was a Tory built. It was one of the bigger ones, really
Hmm.
old
Mhm.
school from the '60s. I think it was called a horse. It was the biggest kind of Troy built walk behind cultivator. Basically, it had
Hmm.
attachments. It was a solid gear drive, really cool piece of equipment. They just don't wear out, made during that era. But we graduated to that, and it always struck me. I was like, oh, Dad, just let me have the tractor. I was a kid. I wanted to get on the dang tractor. So we went from the mule, then we went to the Troy built implement, the walk behind cultivator, and I had an appreciation for just how much really growing you could do with just an implement like that.
Hmm.
And I remember Dad going over in great detail. I said, "Give me this thing. I'm going to roll with this thing." And he said, "No, no. Before you start out, in the spring you cultivate at this depth, and in the summer when we want to preserve moisture, you cultivate at a more shallow depth. All we're trying to do is clip weed." Like he went over this whole process, and that was the nuance behind something as simple as what we commonly call a garden tiller, garden cultivator. There's all these nuances to using that thing that I never would have thought about. Deep tillage versus skim tillage, and actually using the depth bar, which I would have thrown the thing in the weeds and just sunk it down and rolled with it because I'm a dude. That's what I would have done. And he stopped me. He said, "No, you have no idea what you're doing." And he was right. I was 10, 11 years old. And like there's all these nuances to mechanical cultivation that really to be involved in that process, there's a lot more to it than you would think.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think part of what I'm hearing from you there is that there's this element of thinking through it and strategizing, and I,
Yes,
I could
absolutely.
say because when you're adding mechanization, and mechanization beyond just maybe a hand hoe or something like that, what you're talking about is I'm going to try to make a system that allows me to do a larger area better
Yes.
and also more quickly. And so what ends up happening is, having been a part of some of these schemes in the past, you might end up spending 3 or 4 hours dialing in,
Hmm.
adjusting, making tweaks to
Mhm.
this piece of
Yeah.
equipment that you then end up saving 20 hours by
Hmm.
doing it well out in the field. But it's sort of this, oh, we want to get going. We want to get going. Let's get out here and do
Mm.
this thing, rather than hold on a second now, Ray.
Yeah.
We're going to do this in this
Easy.
way now. And this, a little bit of training now is going to keep you from messing with that later. And, I think, man, if you get around people who have thought about this and are into this, shout out to our friend of the pod, Sarah Gerkink. Shout out to
Hey,
friend of the
Russ.
pod, Neil Wilson. Shout out to friend of the pod, the Mark Williams, the chair of the horticulture department. These people are deeply dorky about this stuff, and it's really cool to witness because just these slight changes of some of the angle
Mhm.
of the implement. You mentioned depth,
Yeah.
even the speed.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
you're
Hmm.
going to need to be at like the top end of second gear, maybe, or maybe you're going to be like, you don't want to go out of first gear for this just because it doesn't, it has to throw soil versus
Yes.
digging it versus whatever.
There's a high amount of precision there. You wouldn't think there would be, but there's a high amount of precision, lots of considerations for all those
Hmm.
things, and it's pretty crazy.
And
Yeah.
some of these
Yeah,
people
like,
do it. So I was saying, some of these people do it for the love of the game, right?
yeah.
Because it's
But
cool.
but why? And Alexis, if you were going to say something to this point, you can mention that before. But I'm just like, why would someone want to do mechanical cultivation? Period. Like,
Well,
why even mess with this?
I feel like I have to, and maybe it's not an elephant in the room in this room, but it feels like it in some of
It's a
the
small hippo.
other rooms that I'm in. There's a big push towards no till, and I think, and
Mhm.
that's wonderful. And I do a lot of low till, no till personally. Like I love the idea of that and the way it works. But one thing I'd say is most no-till growers will tell you they've tilled once, right? They tilled that initial time
Yeah.
to break the soil, to break up the, weeds, to sort of like get things going. And I know this isn't about like soil in general, but I just have to say these people, like the people that you mentioned, have set, they're such nerds in the best way about something like weed control and the mechanics and the tools and all that kind of stuff, but they simultaneously, those people care about the soil health. And so when Ray
Hmm.
was saying how his dad was like very particular about when you went, did tillage at a certain depth and things like that, a lot of that has to do with, keeping your soil healthy, keeping your microbes healthy. And even if you're doing low till, or no till, is mechanical stuff, right? Running an inch or two over top, cultivating for those little seedlings that are coming up is not destroying your microbiome. It's not hurting anything, but what it is
Hmm.
taking out those weeds at the top, right? And so, I just felt like I had to like kind of mention that, because I think that there can be this ugly like tillage is really really bad. Well, no, people who care about tillage and are into it, who and are really great growers, are into it, and they're into their soil health as well. And
Yeah.
so, there is a balance there that people are trying to strike,
Hmm.
if they're into, mechanical weed control. So I just
Everything
kind of
has to
wanted
work
to
at
like
scale. I mean, there's
grease
a
that
scale
in.
for everything. So that's a perfect example, Alexis. Yeah. I mean, everything's got that. It may work at 5 acres, but what's your considerations at, 1 acre versus 100 acres?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So why?
absolutely.
So there are some people for whom this mechanical cultivation might even be too much.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of people, on the other hand, they would say, well, you're not going to disturb the soil at all if you just spray. Um,
Mm-hmm.
why might someone want to do this instead of that?
I think the first thing would be, I mean, we work in the specialty crop world, right? And so there's not a ton of herbicides labeled that you can just grow any diverse. Most specialty crop farms are diverse, right? At least in Kentucky, even the largest farms are growing, 10, 15 different crops. Um, and so there's likely nothing labeled that they can use that's not going to damage that crop. If by some chance there is, there's other considerations onto how they're planting. Do they need to have raised beds? So there's a lot more to that, where tillage just might be necessary to even get the right drainage that you want.
And this is a big discussion Alexis has helped me out with the local farmer in my neck of the woods. But it's exactly that issue because we're trying to rotate between specialty crops, in this case, floral crops,
Mhm,
rotate between that and traditional row crops and using pre-emergence. Well, come to
mhm,
find out, the more specialty crops, in this case, flowers, different flower crops, are much more susceptible than row crops to these pre-emergence even after 18 months. It's a real issue. And I went around and around. I've talked to very smart people like Alexis and other people within our university and other universities. And, I'm like, there's always a solution. But in this case, there's not a solution for a herbicide, a pre emergent
mhm,
herbicide, because of that sensitivity of certain crops in the rotation, 3-year rotation scheme. It's just
mhm,
not going to work. So now when I go out to make a site visit again, I'm going to talk a lot about mechanical cultivation. That's going way old school, but in this case, I mean that's where I have to go, and it points back to the conversation of specialty crops. In this case, that's exactly what's going on. It's an agritourism venue for the most part, and it's just not going to fit into the rotation schedule because of the nature of the operation. There is not a good option
mhm,
in this case. So yeah, perfect example.
Yeah, I
mhm,
think stepping a little outside of our normal wheelhouse, there's also in the world of row crops, there are both. Some people have some environmental or ideological reasons for one way or the other, or some other people have just the persuasiveness of the market to try and grow either certified organic or non-GMO, non-genetically engineered, modified organisms. Because I know, for instance, the bourbon industry, there are certain distillers that prefer to buy either non-GMO corn, or or they will only buy non-GMO corn, or even heritage corns, varieties of corn for their bourbon. Well, guess what? Those don't have the advantage of the genetic engineering that allows them to get sprayed with a herbicide and not die. That's
Right.
fundamentally what Roundup Ready corn is this genetic engineering that allows you to spray something that would kill normal corn right over top of it. It hits the weeds, kills the weeds, and the corn stays alive.
Mhm.
A crazy impressive feat of technology. I mean, it's like humans are wild. But there are markets and there are other reasons why, so some consumers, some producers disagree with that. And so if you're pursuing those markets one way or another, you don't have access to those herbicides. So even in a certified organic uh, specialty crop operation, if you have black plastic of tomatoes or corn, you can't spray Roundup in between the rows. You have to
Mhm.
do something else to be able to handle that. If you're if you're certified organic, you can't use those technologies. The other thing is the over reliance on some of those technologies and poor practices of applying these things have led to resistance to herbicides.
Mhm.
There's a variety of different examples of that, but and there's been efforts within the conventional world to address that and change that and make sure that you're rotating and doing these different things. But at its heart, there are certain weeds that are becoming resistant to these herbicides, and as Ray said earlier, it's hard to develop resistance to having your roots ripped up out of the ground with a hoe or with
With a
a
piece of steel
cultivator
of
or
some kind.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that like those are all different reasons why people would go through the pain of trying to figure this out when there are these chemical technologies available. Um, and I just think that that's something that it's important to understand why you're doing something other than it just sounds cool and Alexis is doing it, so everybody should do it, which is basically why I do things. But for the rest of you, that might be something to consider.
Don't follow my example. I like just mowed down my my overwintered cover crop in like 2 weeks ago. So
Do as I say. Do as I
Throw a
say.
stone somewhere.
What I'm hearing from all of this is it's so cool that there's room for all of these methods. I mean, we work with like multiple modes, multiple methods, day in and day out, depending on the scope and scale of an operation. And I am just pumped. I mean, because it's part of my background, I'm still pumped that there's a thriving community of suppliers and equipment and all this cool emerging technology on kind of mechanical weed control.
Mhm.
And as they say, it's not your father's mechanical weed control because it's advanced, hadn't it? And I know you
Mhm.
guys know a lot more about that than I do, but I'm just constantly amazed at small base equipment and the direction that it's going and its incorporation of advanced technologies, but yet it's still mechanical weed
Yeah.
control.
Yeah,
And
the
I
like
love it. I love all of it. Love all of
yeah,
it.
the scale that you can be at, like, we work with these different size farms, and a lot of them are, using hand tools and maybe walk behind tractors. Well, walk behind tractors are great. I love mine, and they have, you know, a lot of new stuff, a lot of new implements. I mean, you can get a plastic bed layer and a bed shaper on a walk behind tractor. So,
And
I mean,
also
like
make
that,
tiny bales of hay.
and they also make tiny bales of hay.
I love
Um,
it.
and, flail mowers and all of these different things that used to only be available as like a 3-point hitch on a large tractor, which wasn't always to scale on some of our farms that are, number one, just small or just aren't, they're rolling enough that a big tractor
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And so, supporting these smaller farms with these kind of like new implements that are also most of the time, not all the time, most like the mini hay baler is very expensive, but most of the time
Yeah.
these things
Yeah.
are a lot more cost effective too, right? So a small farm that's just starting can afford these things that's going to really get them to like a next level at a much more minimum cost. And those advancements in themselves, it's not that the necessarily that the technology itself is new, like a flail mower is being around for a long time, or certain types of tillers, but they're available on literally a smaller scale. And I think that that's like so cool, and so getting so much more popular, and there's different brands and they're high quality, and shout out Italy for just making cool stuff.
Stuff that
But
lasts a
that's
long
fun.
time. Yeah.
But yeah, but then
Full disclosure. Alexis's main name is Amaris. She has Italian descent, so this is
I got to throw
pro
out the
Italian
Italian.
propaganda.
shout out to my Italian
Amorese.
bros.
How dare you?
Amorese.
Don't surprise if
Um,
cheese comes into this conversation. I'm just saying.
I mean, now you know where it comes from.
Yeah, proprio
Uh,
formaggi.
but but like going up to, we've got, farms who are doing, 20, 30 acres of vegetable production full time, and they're using camera guided equipment, which is something we normally think of for our row crop people. But there is technology available now for weed control systems that are camera guided, and so takes a little bit more mind usage off of the farmer, or enables more people on the farm to be able to drive the tractor, and then you can send them out and get things when they're small, and not accidentally wait too long because the head farmer couldn't get out in the tractor because he's doing something else. So it's crazy the things that they've come up with. And I know we took a group, Sarah, who we've shouted earlier with the Organic Association of Kentucky, took a group. Thank you, Sarah Money, for that, of growers
Woo,
and
shout out to Air.
some
Sustainable
technical
Agriculture
providers.
Research and Education, Southern Region. Shout them
SARE.
out.
We love them. We appreciate them. We appreciate the great resources if you need stuff on cover crops or anything. Obviously CCD, but we also go through SARE. So great stuff there. But they paid for us to take a group of growers up to the Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, which was held at one of the Purdue farms. And, it was row crops as well as specialty crops, but it was the whole gamut. It was, they had that high wheel hoe that we talked about earlier, but all the way up to literal robots that are just set loose in a field. And they can really only do one crop. I maybe two, but they plant it. The robot will literally plant the seed and then go through and weed it because it has mapped where all the seeds are supposed to be, and it's solar powered. And so literally you drop it off and you tell it where it is on the map, and then you just come back for it in a few hours and your field is weeded. And that's just bonkers. And it's not like millions and millions of dollars. I mean, from a perspective of these really large tractors that literally I'm
I'm gonna
dying.
like. Why don't you need to get a drink of water?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Alexis
So
needs to get
so
it done. I
so
mean,
I'm
some
so excited.
yeah,
yeah.
choked up.
The world of agriculture is this crazy world of scale with different amounts of money sounding reasonable or sounding crazy, just depending on what type of farming you're doing. A combine that costs $1 million to some people would give them a heart attack, and to some people
Yeah.
that's just kind of doing business. And so you were saying that these robots are in a more affordable range.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're like, I think the one we saw in action, which could do several acres at a time, was like 200,000, which again, when you're talking scale of like the combine is literally costing 500,000 and up, is pretty chill considering the amount of time you can just walk away to go do something
Well, and
else.
labor adds up quickly too, doesn't it? I don't know how many,
Yeah.
what you could substitute that in for the amount of labor, but I mean, just
Yeah.
seeing these, like you said, just little mechanical, it would have terrified me in the 80s to see a mechanical robot looking dog out there weeding
Terrified
the
you, but in a
field.
cool way.
But
I
it
know
would
you.
really, I would have been trying to ride that thing. I mean, I'm not lying, but you mentioned like solar power, and that's a whole nother thing. Like I get on YouTube and I'm always looking for battery powered stuff because I'm super interested in it. And I see that some of this stuff is starting to approach things like not only AI and the optics behind it, but it's still mechanical weed control, but it's very
Mhm.
advanced. And in some cases, it's using like
Smart.
battery powered or solar powered, even like you said. But like it
Mhm.
had, some of them have lasers. That's my goal in life, is to have a mechanical weeder laser dog that can
Can
shoot lasers
I
at the bad guy weeds. Yeah.
Can I tell you? So at that field day, there was a guy from Michigan, and I wish I could remember his name, but his research was on like electrocuting weeds.
When you really don't like cockleburrs, you just
Listen,
electrocute them.
this is they it used the energy in the air. So it's like similar to lightning. It's like static electricity or something like that. I'm going to say this all wrong, and if he hears this I apologize, but I think I'm getting the gist of it. We were talking over lunch. It was very hot that day. Anyways, so and it shoots this beam. And if you're not watching on YouTube right now, watch me make weird hand movements. You should go do that. But it shoots this beam between 2 points, and anything, you use it on a crop. So your crop is roughly at 12 inches high. So anything above 12 inches, it shoots this beam, and that it crosses those weeds above 12 inches, cross through that beam, and it literally electrocutes it down to the root and kills it all the way down to the root using like the air. Like there's no, fuel. I mean, maybe other than to run the wheels that it's on. And I'm like, excuse me, what? What? That is
This is not a
awesome.
mule and 3-point
So there's a
cultivator.
That
Michigan
is the
there's a Michigan State like fact sheet called Basics of Electrical Weed Control.
okay, we're gonna have to link
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I need
I
to
don't know
go
the I
through
don't
and
know
read
Sounds
that.
like a
the
field trip
person's
to
the
me.
author's name isn't listed, which is a
Weird.
bit collectivist, which I respect. It
But
is
yeah, I
some
mean, that's
extension.
mechanical weed control, but just not in the way we think about it, and where mechanical weed control might be going in the future, because you can't mess up if you're electrocuting it down to the root. And like, I don't know, I'm a little scared of the plant that develops resistance to electricity.
Yes.
Bro.
I
Yeah.
know. So it's like this
Just
marriage
spliced
of
in.
super high tech and like super old school. I mean, this is really that juxtaposition in my brain's really jiving. I'm like, I like it. It's like a hot rod cruiser
It's
that's
like an electric
electrified. Yeah.
banjo.
Oh yeah, something like that. But I mean, so exciting times for all of this. I mean,
Well, so
good
the
stuff.
Alexis is really burying the lead here, and staying humble, because not only did you go to the Midwest
Mm.
Weed Control Field Day, but you and Sarah, with support from Transition to Organic Partnership Project funds, and as well as from money from SARE and support from lots of these vendors, you're bringing the mechanical weed control to Kentucky. Is that right?
What up? Yes, there is a Kentucky, first ever Kentucky Mechanical Weed Control Field Day. And it is specifically aimed at specialty crop producers, where other ones, the Midwest one, which is big and has been around for a long time and is awesome, is a mix. So it's, part specialty crop, but it's also row crop focused equipment as well. Ours is solely for specialty crop growers, and it is at a big range of scales. So we will have things like hand tools. So if you're, a brand new farmer and you're like, I cannot keep buying my tools from the, local place and having them break in a season, or, you're getting fiberglass in your hands, because I have been there, and you're just looking for tools maybe better to get in between. You're like, I can't find the right hoe to get in between my plants. We got you. If you're ready to move up into the next stage, into that walk behind tractor, but you're not really sure if you can even run one, or you want to see one in action, you want to see the implements, you want to, touch it, feel it, watch it go. We got you. Earth Tools will be there, which is a Kentucky, and they ship nationwide, but they happen to be located in Kentucky. So shout out to Earth Tools. We love them very much. And then if you're there and you're ready to even, bump up to something larger, you say, I need to decrease my labor or something like that, and I want to go up to 4-wheel tractors. We've got a lot of implements coming in for that. And so we'll be able to show, and then even, yes, camera guided equipment. So Garford will be there with some camera guided equipment. Earth Tools will be there. Tillmore will be there with some really awesome finger weeders, basket weeders, some new stuff that they've got out, and they're just launched it. So you'll be able to see it in action. And I think the best part, and when we took growers up to Purdue, what they said was, it's really scary to invest in new equipment, whether you're spending $100 or you're spending $100,000, right? If you're, whatever your scale is, it's hard to spend that money on something if you're not sure if it's going to work for you. And so being able to see it in action, and a lot of times run it yourself, and see if, this is the right tool for you, really will instill a lot of confidence in making sure that you're making a good investment for your farm, again, whatever scale that's at. And I think that that's something really special. But we'll also have some time, what we're calling choose your own adventure. And so there'll be things on solarization. So there's some research being done at University of Kentucky South Farm, which is the horticulture research farm in Lexington, which is where this is being hosted. So there's some research being done on, solarization as weed control and things along those lines. So you'll be able to even see that if, like I said, your scale could be, very different, how you might incorporate that into your weed control culture, right, on your farm. And so, yeah, we're really excited about it, and having all these vendors. We'll have a lot of great educational vendors there too. So Southern SARE will be there. Kentucky Horticulture Council, Kentucky State University will be there talking about some of the grant opportunities that they have for purchasing things like equipment and education. Organic Association, this is a partnered thing, like we said, working with Sarah. But so there's just a lot to be offered there, and really good food from our friends over at the Food Connection. They'll be making food with some local items. And there'll be ice cream sandwiches. So if I haven't talked you into it already, I know you're
All
jumping
a
at
good
the
thing.
opportunity.
But there's no such thing as a free ice cream sandwich, right?
Oh no, we want your opinions for it.
Give us your
Is
evaluation.
that
You
the
get the ice cream
registration?
sandwich. Nobody gets hurt.
Nobody gets hurt. I will give you the ice cream sandwich in return for your very short, very quick evaluation and thoughts on the event. But yeah, so we'll drop this link down in the show notes as well. But you can find that on our CCD website. And Brett, do you already have that pulled up? It's ccd.uky/MW.
So hold on, back it up.
Wait a minute.
ccd.uky.edu
Okay.
/ and if you just go to that main page, it's up at the top in the main menu, but it's
Yes.
mechanical weed control fit MWCFD. But I
Yes.
would just go to the CCD website. Give her a break, folks. She's only been here a year. Okay, start remembering
Only
what our email address is.
only
Remember
one
what our
growing season.
yeah.
I'm just very, I mean, the acronyms are
You're more of a plant
wilding
person
out
than a
here.
letter person per se.
Yeah.
You don't need those
But
letters and plants.
yeah. So we're really excited about it because we know and we've seen in action how it really helps farmers make good decisions that they're confident in. And I'm just like pumped about it. So if you're interested in it, registration is up on our website now, and that we didn't mention the date yet. That's very important. It is on a Tuesday, so September 23rd. Hoping for good weather, but it will happen rain or shine, and we do have a rain plan in case you're worried. But I'm just really excited. There's a lot of great equipment, including if you're into this weed things, you'll know what this is. And if you're not, then you should come and see it. But UK has a stale seed bedder that was built by our good friend Neil Wilson and Department Chair Mark Williams. But the stale seed bedder is really, really cool. And if anything, just come to see that.
Give us the elevator pitch on what a steel seed bedder does, Alexis.
Oh, I'm gonna do a bad job at this. But no, you've actually run the machine. I've not actually
This is
run
this
it.
is my this is my floor. I'm actually getting off the elevator now. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Like you
Uh,
do it.
the idea of steel seed bedding in general is that you trick a round of weed seeds into
Yes.
germinating before
Yes.
you plant any of your stuff,
Hmm.
and you kill them. Because the reality is we think of weeds as just coming from the ground, but weeds, with the exception of some that grow from other things, they're coming from a seed in the ground. And so it's
Hmm.
like one weed ticket that has now been cached to grow, and it's gone. And over
Hmm.
time, if you do that enough times, you start to reduce the weed pressure, you start to reduce the weed seed bank that's in your soil.
Hmm.
And so this weed stale seed bedding is you prepare the soil as if you're getting ready to plant. You let one version or one round of seeds come up, and then you kill them. The question is then how to do that at scale, because it's easy
Hmm.
to do that in a smaller scale. And so this really cool. It's kind of like a blend of some shanks and a big rolling pin and some other stuff that
Hmm.
you pull behind the tractor, but its main role is to go ahead and take out one or two or even three rounds of weeds before you plant, so that now
Mhm.
you're fighting, you're kind of getting out ahead of the weeds for the year,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost like the mechanical equivalent of a pre-emergent.
Yes. Yeah, I've got a really cool video on it. So when this episode, airs, and if you're listening to it, go to our Instagram at Horticulture Podcast, and I'll post the video up there, and so you can just see. And it's just, for those of you who are like, oh, I don't want to till too much. This is just getting that top layer, like we talked about. So you're not disrupting those microbes and all those good
Hmm.
things. You're just disrupting those baby weeds coming up. So
That was one of those scenarios where it took for what felt like forever to get it dialed in. I
To
wasn't even
dial
that
that
involved. I was
in,
just
yeah.
sort of
yeah,
watching and helping,
yeah.
but then you do, and you're
But
like,
once it is,
oh
man,
yeah,
oh,
I mean, that's
it's
pretty
so great.
incredible. You're tricking the seed. You're bringing them to light and heat source, all the things that
Mhm.
weed seeds need at that specific depth. And then you're like the bait and switch. You're like, boom, chop you down,
Bye.
then let your friends come up and then do the same thing. I mean,
Uh-huh.
sounds simple, but not in execution. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
yeah.
Look forward to
So
seeing
There's
that
just
one
gonna be a lot of
myself.
dorks
That's
there who
awesome.
all think about this and
yeah.
care about it that you can bounce ideas with. That
Yes.
to me is one of those huge points of
Talking to
value.
other
That's harder to.
farmers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't think about
totally.
this. Or
So
like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that before. There's so many ideas that you see, and you're like, some person came up with it. Like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, and then but it like changes someone's life. That
yeah.
Yeah,
that kind of
Yeah.
thing is pretty cool.
it is.
Well,
Very, very
yes.
cool.
So if we've convinced you to come to the Mechanical Weed Field Day on September 23rd, 2025, click down below in the show notes. If you just Google Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, University, Kentucky, it'll be the first thing to pop up. I just checked. So you can go ahead and click in there and register for some good food, some good community, some good learning time. And if you have questions about that, you can email us at horticulturepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's in the show notes, or you can reach out individually. My contact info is on that registration page. If you've got questions, but a lot of good info on there. If you want to see like who's coming, what kind of things you're going to see, what the agenda is, it's a full day of really cool stuff for anybody and at any scale in specialty crop world. And with that, I will say thank you for joining us today. And we hope that you will join us again next time. Well, go grow something cool. See you later.